The first night, we heard chanting in the desert, circling our camp. We knew the fort wasn't abandoned. Something out there was watching us, and it wanted inside. But that wasn't how it started. Orders came down in early '91, deep in the Gulf War, when everything was sand, sweat, and silence broken by sudden fire. They told us to occupy an old ruin out in the Saudi desert, a fort crumbling long before the first tank ever crossed the dunes. Routine post, they said. Secure the site, set up comms, hold until relieved. Nothing unusual, but orders that vague are never routine. We rolled in just before dusk, our convoy of Humvees rattling through waves of heat. The fort rose out of the sand like bones, sandstone walls jagged against the dying sun, towers broken, gates long gone. It looked dead in the way only old things can be, too ancient to even haunt themselves. Sergeant Kane spat in the dust. This place should have stayed buried. Inside the walls, silence pressed down like a lid. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Just our boots, scuffing stone, and the rattle of rifles shifting in our hands. At the center of the courtyard was a cracked well, choked black with shadow. I remember looking down into it, feeling the air drift up faint and cold, colder than it had any right to be under that sun. We set up comms in what was left of a roofless hall. Morales, our radio man, ran his whip antenna through a gap in the wall. The second he powered it on, the static was wrong. Not the soft hiss of empty air. This was thicker, heavier. It had texture, like whispers played backward through a broken cassette. He fiddled with the dials, but it didn't clear. Could be interference, Morales muttered, though he didn't believe it. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. By nightfall, we had the perimeter secured. Sandbags at the breaches, trip flares strung along the dunes, claymores wired into choke points. The desert sky stretched endless and sharp above us, stars like nails driven into glass. For a few hours, we let ourselves believe this was just another lonely outpost. Then the chanting began. At first it was faint, a low murmur on the wind. I thought it might have been villagers, prayers carrying from miles away. But the sound grew steadier, closer, until it circled the fort itself. Voices, many voices, chanting words we couldn't place. Not Arabic, not any language we knew, but syllables that throbbed like drumbeats inside our bones. Eyes up, Kane barked. Thermals on. We swept the dunes with our scopes. Nothing. No heat signatures, no movement. Just the sound, weaving round and round our walls, patient and deliberate. Then the trip flares ignited. White fire blossomed around the fort, tearing open the night. The sand glowed like snow, shadows leaping across the broken towers. And that's when I saw it. Not a man, not an animal. A column of smoke, taller than any figure should be, gliding just beyond the reach of the light. It had edges, shifting, alive. And deep inside it, two golden eyes burned steady as coals. Contact, I shouted, rifle raised. The others spun, weapons snapping into position. But before we could fire, the thing dissolved, gone like it had never been there. The chanting cut out mid-syllable, leaving only silence. No one spoke for a long minute. Then Kane said, "Whatever that was, it knows we're here." We didn't sleep. Not one of us. Every groan of stone, every pop of static from Morales' radio was a hammer on the nerves. And the well seemed to breathe, faint and patient. By dawn, we convinced ourselves it had been nerves, heat, tricks of the dark. Soldiers lied to themselves better than anyone. But when I went to refill my canteen, I froze. The sand around the well wasn't empty anymore. Symbols had been burned into it. Circles, spirals, jagged marks etched so deep the earth still smoldered faintly. In the center of those lines, a single word glowed, pulsing like coals under ash. I didn't recognize it then. None of us did. But I know what it means now. It means welcome. We pretended the symbols were some shepherd's joke until noon, when the desert heat made even the lies sweat. Kane radioed battalion for guidance. The reply came back clipped and fast. Hold position. Await further tasking. That was it. No talk of the markings. No evac. Just the kind of order that tells you the people giving it already know more than they're saying. By late afternoon, the wind finally stirred. One breath, then none. Then a second breath like the desert trying to decide if it remembered how. Sand lifted and fell in size. Morales kept adjusting the gain on his set. "Signal keeps ghosting," he said. "Like there's another tower out here, transmitting on ours." "There isn't," Kane said, not looking up from the map. "At 1,700 we split watch. I drew well duty with Miller, a quiet kid from Amarillo who kept a St. Michael pendant tucked under his flak. He was the kind of soldier you want next to you. Steady, not loud, not brave in the stupid way. We stood by the cracked stones and peered down into the shaft. It swallowed our light like it was thirsty. "You hear that?" Miller whispered. I listened. The well wasn't empty. It breathed. Very faint, very slow. Not wind, not water. Something pacing its breath to ours from very far away. "Could be air shifting in tunnels," I said. Miller nodded like he wanted to believe me. Dusk smeared purple across the sand. The fort's walls took on that flat gray that makes distance lie. Morales' whip antenna hissed in a bad mood. Somewhere out on the flats, a shape moved. Low, many-limbed. A fox. The dunes made it stutter. When I brought my binoculars up, the world swam. "Eyes up," Kane called from the north wall. Movement along the east arc. We swung to position. Night fell the way it always does in the desert, like a trap shutting. The stars snapped on. The chanting began again, closer this time. Afraid of vowels and sibilants. Walking around the fort like men on patrol. Miller's hand brushed the lip of the well. He flinched and yanked back. "Hot," he hissed. "It's hot." I touched the stone where his fingers had been. Warmth pulsed through it like blood. The breath from the shaft quickened. Trip flares coughed brimstone up and down the perimeter. White spears of light tore holes in the dark. And in those holes we saw them. Columns of smoke with edges that held longer than they should, gliding along the berms. Each carried a pair of eyes, not always where a head should be. Some high, some low, some at angles that made your neck ache to look. "Thermals," Kane barked. "Negative," Morales said, voice shaking. "No signatures. They're nothing." The radio whined. Static rose like steam, and in it, beneath the crackle, something spoke Arabic that wasn't Arabic, syllables grinding against each other like stones. Then, clear as if he stood in the courtyard with us, a man's voice came through on an American channel. "Open the gate." We froze. The voice was tired, Midwest, a little wry like he'd spent his last 3 years making bad jokes and chow lines. The kind of voice you trust without meaning to. But no one in our platoon had that cadence. Miller's mouth fell open. "Identify," Kane said. "Call sign." A beat. Then the same voice, softer. "You're late." "Identify," Kane repeated. "Steal now." Another voice, this one a woman's, British educated and amused. Always with the passwords. "Children." Miller swallowed. "Sergeant, there's someone in the well." We turned our lights down. He was right. The shaft held a shine now, like water far below. But the shine moved wrong, rippling against gravity. And in it, as if floating up from an ocean floor, letters formed, glowing a low ember red. The same script that ringed the sand. The same pulse. "Welcome." The chanting stopped. The wind died. For a second, the desert forgot it existed. Then everything moved at once. The radio screamed. The tripwires sang, without snapping. Sand avalanched from the walls, though no hand touched them. In the corner of my eye saw 3 of the smoke columns flow together and pour through a breach like ink tilting in a jar. "Contact inside." I yelled. We fired. Muzzle flashes carved the courtyard into stutters. The rounds tore dust and stone and a spray of cold that turned to steam the instant it hit air. I don't know what we hit. I don't know if we hit anything at all. The smoke recoiled, then surged, then seemed to decide and split. One part sluicing toward Morales' antenna, another toward the barracks room where we'd stacked rucks. "Keep them off the comms," Kane shouted. "Miller with me." We sprinted. The column near the radio reared like a cobra and struck. The whip antenna bent without bending, angles multiplying, shadow chewing through metal like termites through wood. Morales swatted at it with the butt of his rifle, a reflex, a stupid brave thing, and the shadow wrapped his forearm. He screamed as frost bloomed under his sleeve, veins writing themselves in white fire across his skin. I slammed into him and tore him backward. The shadow let go with a sound like wet silk ripping. Morales fell, clutching his arm. His breath came in shudders. "It said my name," he gasped. Inside my head, it said, "Do not answer." Kane snapped. "Nobody answer anything that speaks in your head." His voice cracked on anything. The smoke at the rucks found Miller's St. Michael pendant where it had slipped out of his collar. It halted, tilted. The eyes inside it flared, and not gold anymore, blue like faraway cold. It whispered. I didn't hear words. I heard distance. Miller staggered, as if someone had pushed him between the shoulder blades. He caught himself and ripped the pendant off, fingers shaking, and hurled it into the well. "Why'd you?" I started. "It wanted it," he said, teeth chattering though sweat ran down his neck. "It wants tokens." His eyes went to our dog tags. The well answered with a low, delighted hum. "Fall back to the hall," Kane called. "Choke point." We collapsed into the roofless chamber with the pillars, forming a horseshoe around the entrance. The columns of smoke flowed to the threshold and stopped. The line where shadow met stone shivered, as if there were a law even they remembered not to cross. "Why aren't they coming in?" Morales whispered, cradling his arm. "Threshold," Miller said, voice small. "Old places. Lines the old ones can't cross without invitation." "Spare me," Kane muttered. "Old ones don't jam radios." The radio popped. The tired Midwestern voice returned, patient as a doctor. "Open the gate." This time the words reached for me. They wore my father's timbre for a syllable. They'd been toward the first girl I'd ever loved for another. Then there were no one I knew, only gravity in a throat. "Open the gate," the voice repeated. "Say it." The pillars groaned. Hairline fractures spread like frostwork. At the threshold, the smoke thickened, testing the seam between in and out. It didn't push. It waited. Miller stared at the letters still glowing faint in the sand around the well. "We gave it welcome," he said. "We repeated its script with our feet, with the antenna, with our—" He stopped. We followed his eyes to the marks on the floor of the hall. We hadn't noticed them when we chose it as our fallback. Half-erased carvings around the pillars, centuries old, circular and exact. Our boots had traced them into clarity again, step by step. "We're inside a seal," Miller said, voice gone flat. "And we just finished drawing it." "Good," Kane said. "Then maybe it keeps them out." Miller shook his head. "Or it keeps us in." A sound rose from the well. Not breath this time. Laughter, dry, papery, like reeds rubbed together. It came up the shaft and climbed the stones and found our ears with fingers. The radio clicked once, and through pure static came a single word that landed in my mouth like a command I'd known since birth. "Say it." I didn't mean to speak. My tongue moved without me. The first syllable scraped my throat. Miller's hand hit my chest hard enough to bruise. "Bite down," he hissed. "Bite your tongue if you have to." I did. Copper flooded my mouth. The compulsion broke. Kane's face had gone a stranger's pale. He keyed his handset with a shaking thumb. "Blackjack actual, Blackjack 2. We are compromised by unknown hostiles. Request immediate guidance or extract." He lifted the mic away from his lips and whispered to us. "I don't care if they send a weather balloon. We are leaving at first light." A breeze found us from nowhere, sweet and cool, smelling of dates and old smoke, and something like rain that never falls. The smoke columns swayed as if nodding. "First light," the Midwestern voice repeated from the radio, gentle as a lullaby. "Open the gate at first light." The channel died. The chanting did not return. Nothing did. The night settled around our seal like a cat curling to sleep, pretending indifference with its claws tucked under. We held the line until dawn, every minute an hour. When the horizon bruised from black to iron to dull gold, Kane stood, rolling his shoulders like a man walking into a prize fight he knows he can't win, but must attend. "On my mark," he said. "We move fast. We do not stop. If someone speaks behind you in a voice you love, you do not answer." He looked at me. And nobody says anything about gates. At the threshold, the smoke thinned, threads unraveling. The well sighed. The sand around it shifted, and the word burned once more. Not welcome now, but something with teeth. We stepped into the morning knowing it hadn't lost us. It had only let the game change. Dawn should have felt like deliverance, but in that desert it only sharpened the edges. The light came fast and hard. No softness, no grace. Shadows vanished in an instant, like they'd been burned away. For a moment the fort looked like nothing more than a ruin. Sandstone, cracks, old scars. No smoke, No chanting, no whispers from the well. But we knew better. Kane gave the order to move. Packs up, weapons tight, eyes forward. Morales' arm was wrapped in gauze. The skin underneath already marbled with veins that glowed faintly in the morning light. He said it didn't hurt anymore, but the way he avoided our eyes told the truth. Miller kept near him, watching like he was waiting for a fuse to blow. The dunes stretched out in every direction, blank and brutal. Our compass pointed north, same as it always had, but the horizon looked strange. Ridges didn't line up with the map. Rock outcrops stood where none had the day before. It felt like the desert had turned itself just enough to test whether we'd notice. We marched anyway. Half an hour out, the radio popped alive. Static, then a male voice. American, calm, official. Blackjack 2. Report position. Kane snatched the handset. This is Blackjack 2. Moving north from grid, he rattled off coordinates. Request extraction at designated LZ. The reply came smooth. Copy. Extraction inbound. Whole course. Kane looked relieved for half a second. Then Morales said, softly, that wasn't battalion. We all stared. How do you know? I asked. Morales' face was gray with sweat. Because it didn't ask for authentication. They always ask for authentication. That voice just wanted us to keep walking. The desert wind shifted, and I swear I heard laughter on it. Faint, dry, like sand slipping through bone. We kept moving, but the air grew heavier, hotter, as if the sun was too close. My canteen sloshed lighter than it should have, though I'd barely touched it. Miller swore his was empty when he knew it had been full. Kane made us stop, check gear. Every canteen was drained, every pouch light. Even the ammo felt wrong, rounds rattling like hollow shells. That's when we saw the footprints. Not ours. Ahead of us, a trail of boot prints cut across the dunes. Standard issue tread, deep and fresh. Morales dropped to one knee, studying them. American. Last few hours. Friendlies. Miller asked. Kane shook his head. No units operate this deep. Not without armor. We followed the prints. They led us to a ridge, then down into a shallow basin. At the center stood a tent, olive drab, sun faded, flaps stirring though no wind touched them. An old U.S. field tent, the kind used in the 70s. We circled, weapons ready. No movement, no sound. Kane gestured, and I pulled the flap back. Inside were cots, 6 of them. Each held a man in desert fatigues, boots still on, dog tags glinting. They were lying flat, eyes open, staring at the ceiling canvas. Their mouths moved silently, lips forming words too slow to hear. Miller whispered, "They're praying." Then one of them sat up. His neck creaked like wood bending. His eyes locked onto me, dull, yellowed, but alive. He opened his mouth, and the same voice from the radio poured out. "Open the gate." I stumbled back. The others sat up in unison, mouths wide, chanting the phrase together. "Open the gate. Open the gate. Open the gate." Kane shouted, "Weapons free." We opened fire. Rounds shredded canvas, punched through bodies, tore sandbags to dust. The men fell back onto their cots, holes blooming in their chests. For a heartbeat, silence. Then they sat up again, untouched, flesh smooth, uniforms unmarked, still chanting. "Fall back." Kane roared. "Out, out." We scrambled from the tent, the chant following, louder, layered now with a chorus of voices that weren't human, deep, ancient, like the dunes themselves had learned to speak. The footprints outside shifted. Would have been boot prints now dragged like claws. We ran north, stumbling over ridges, lungs tearing at the heat. The chant pursued, echoing without source. Morales fell, clutching his arm. The gauze split, revealing skin cracked like dry riverbeds, light glowing from beneath. Miller hauled him up, but Morales' eyes, they weren't his anymore. They glowed faint, like embers banked in ash. He whispered, "It's already inside me." We didn't argue. We couldn't. By midday, the basin and the tent were gone. We stood on flat sand, horizon empty. Kane collapsed to his knees, ripping at his map. "This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense." The radio crackled. A new voice, female, precise, British accent. "Blackjack 2, you are off course. Turn east. The way is open." I snatched the handset, rage boiling. "Who the hell are you?" The reply came soft. "We've been waiting." The sky darkened though the sun still blazed. Shadows stretched too long, bending the wrong way. The sand beneath our boots rippled like water. From the horizon, shapes rose, columns of smoke, tall and crowned with burning eyes. They marched without legs, closing the distance fast. We formed a line, rifles ready, hearts pounding. Kane shouted, "Hold," but my finger itched on the trigger. Then the ground beneath us cracked. Sand poured into a fissure that yawned wide, revealing stone steps spiraling down into darkness. From below came a breath, slow, deep, patient. Morales whispered, "That's the gate." The smoke column stopped, circling us, not attacking, waiting for us to choose. The crack kept widening until it remembered it was a stairwell. Stone steps, worn to curves by feet older than history, spiraled into a throat of cold air. The chant on the wind cut out, like a radio knob twisted to mute. The smoke columns ringed the fracture and held position, containment, not assault, waiting for permission or protocol, waiting for us to do the one thing soldiers are trained to do when a door opens: clear it. Ken looked like he wanted to spit and found his mouth too dry. "We're not going down there," he said. "We hold perimeter and wait for extract." The radio answered him. Not a voice. 3 clicks, perfectly timed, like a range safety counting a volley. Then a 4th click, offset and patient. "Authenticate." Kane snapped, as if etiquette could bully the desert. Nothing came back. Morales stood on the lip of the stairwell, bandage loose, the glow under his skin dimmer in daylight, but no less wrong. His head cocked, as if listening to a frequency only dogs use. "It doesn't want you, Sarge," he said softly. "It wants a witness." "That's not a volunteer call," Kane said. "That's you getting distance from your rifle." Miller slid a fresh magazine home by instinct and checked my eyes like a squad leader reads a thermometer. "We take a peek," he said. "One flight. Mark as we go. If we see anything that smells like welcome, we reverse." Kane hated it. He also hated the idea of telling Battalion. He watched the door to hell open and did nothing. 2 down, 2 overwatch, he decided. "Miller, you're on me. Morales, you," and his eyes cut to me. "You're top cover. If we're not back in 5, you call it in and move." I almost protested. Then I saw the way the smoke columns leaned when Morales breathed. They weren't waiting on Kane or Miller. They were pacing him. "Copy," I said. We hooked a chem light to paracord and dropped it into the throat. It fell forever, a little green comet turning and turning, until it came to rest on a landing not far below. The air that bled up smelled of damp limestone and old incense, and the ghost of a campfire put out with milk. I led with the muzzle, Miller with the other light. Came behind us, counting steps under his breath. 27 to the first landing. A niche in the wall held a jar with a crusted lip, a braid of hair tied around its neck. King didn't look at it. He chalked an arrow on the stone. We kept going. The stairwell narrowed, the curve tighter. My shoulder scraped cool rock. The temperature fell another 10 degrees. Somewhere beyond the walls, water moved in small, polite motions. The chem light haloed a second landing. This one cut with shallow bowls in the floor. Miller crouched, touched one with a gloved finger, smelled it. "Oil," he murmured. "Burned, not long." His voice tried to make that a lie and failed. We made the third landing, and the stair mouth opened into a chamber whose geometry argued with itself. The ceiling arched like a rib cage. The walls bowed inward. The floor decided to be a bowl and a plane at once. On a low plinth in the center stood a brass lantern, its sides filigreed so intricately it looked woven, not cast. It held no flame. It held a cold the color of old honey, not light, but the memory of it. Above the lantern, chains fixed to the ceiling met to a ring, and from that ring hung a looped rope, black with use, swung by a breeze that didn't exist. Miller took one breath and keyed up. Blackjack 2 to actual. We have a subsurface structure, multiple landings, chamber with artifacts, no hostiles, marking position. The radio answered with a Midwestern voice wearing the accent like a mask. "Open the gate." Miller's thumb froze on the transmit. Kane plucked the handset away and killed the squelch. "We are off net," he said, to the chamber or to himself I couldn't tell. In my peripheral vision, the brass lantern made a decision. The cold inside it tightened, condensed into a point that didn't glow so much as insist. The rope above it stopped swinging. All the tiny hairs on my arms tried to stand inside the suit liner. "Do not touch that," I said, already stepping between Kane and the plinth. "Wasn't planning to," he answered, and the sound of his voice said I was thinking about it. Miller's light landed on the walls. Carvings ran shoulder height all the way around, continuous as a script that didn't need to lift the stylus. Not letters. Scenes. Men with spears. Women with bowls. Faces drawn wrong on purpose. Lines of soldiers in armor older than books kneeling to receive something from a figure made of smoke and geometry. The figure's hands held the lantern. The hands were wrong. Jointed too many times, bending in gratitude or hunger, I couldn't tell. "Look," Miller said, pointing. In the last panel, the lantern lay on its side. From its mouth, smoke poured. The soldiers who'd knelt now ran. The bowls spilled. The smoke smiled in lines that weren't a mouth. The last figure etched in the sequence was a lone man, carrying the lantern upright again, his eyes drawn as two coals. Under his feet, a seal like the one in our hall above. Boundaries inside boundaries. A whisper slid down the stairwell behind us, dry, papery, almost human. Morales on watch, saying my name the way a radio says a call sign. I key my throat might say again. "Don't say anything," he said, not on the radio. Beside him, above him, below him. "They want you to answer." That's the hook. Kane's jaw worked. "We've seen enough. We back out. We burn this mark in a memory, and we lie on our statements until someone with a bigger badge decides what parts they can afford to hear." The chain overhead thrummed once, gently. The rope twitched. The lantern's cold point listened. We started back up. The first landing had drifted a foot to the left. Kane chalked a fresh arrow, and the chalk came away wet. The second landing's bowls were clean now, oil gone, stone dry. On the third, a handprint bloomed on the wall where none had been. 5 long fingers, too slender, pressed in soot without soot existing. It matched nothing living I'd seen. It matched the carvings. "Fast," Kane said, and we moved faster. We broke the lip of the fissure into sun that hadn't moved enough for what we'd done. Morales stood with his back to the ring of smoke columns, eyes high as if tracking birds. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded once and didn't lower his chin. "They want," he stopped, smiled in a way I had never seen on his face. "They want to be generous." "Fantastic," Kane said. "We're not in a taking mood." The ground rippled. The ring tightened. The column's eyes burned a color I couldn't name, a wavelength that lived somewhere between gold and wound. One stepped, or flowed, forward in the sand under a glass to a mirror and cracked again. It stopped at the edge of the fissure as if it respected stairs. A voice climbed it, calm, British patient. "One witness. One lantern. Then you may leave." "We don't have a lantern," Kane said, deadpan. "Not yet," the Midwestern voice said from the radio, so close to honest it hurt. "But you will." The fisher's breath became the fort's breath became my breath. The desert in a single lung. Miller's hand brushed his chest out of habit for the St. Michael he'd thrown away. Finding nothing, he closed his fist around air like he could squeeze courage out of it. "Sarge," he said, eyes on me because he knew what Kane was trying not to know. "If we run this the smart way, we pick the variable. We don't let the variable pick us." Kane stared at Morales. The glow beneath the bandage pulsed once, twice. In time with a heartbeat you could hear if you let it. Morales met his eyes and didn't blink. He looked relieved. "No," I said, before the sergeant could. Morales tilted his head to me, apologetic. "It's been whispering welcome to me since last night," he said. "But that's not what it says now. Now it says home." I'd been in enough rooms with enough commanders to know when a call was going to happen without me. I stepped into it anyway. You send him, we don't get him back. You send anybody, we don't get us back. That stairwell isn't for people who want to report. It's for people who want to belong. The column swayed, amused. The radio clicked once, twice, 3 times. In the 4th gap something tapped, like knuckles on glass. Kane's face hardened in stages. "This is Blackjack 2, he said to nobody on a net that didn't exist, initiating denial. He pulled a thermite kin from his pack, thumbed the cap, yanked the cord. Sparks spat, liquid fire spilling bright, white like a piece of the sun had chipped and fallen. He hurled it down the stairwell. It should have burned air to glass and stone to memory. Instead it fell and dimmed like a flare, entering deep water. By the time it hit the first landing, it was a coal. It rolled off the step, and the cold point inside the lantern downstairs drank it like a tired man drinks tea. The British voice sighed, disappointed in a child. Gate denial acknowledged. It said, alternate ingress authorized. The fissure closed, not with force, with choice. The sand flowed in, the stone knit, the air forgot. The ring of smoke eased back a foot, as if the room had gotten smaller. The desert went very quiet. Move, Kane said, voice a rag on a dry throat. Unbearing. We're done dancing. We broke the ring on a count, each man through a different gap. The columns did not pursue. They followed, not hunting, not hurting, escorting as a funeral procession escorts a casket through streets that remember the route. The sun climbed wrong. Our shadows stayed forward instead of trailing. The world insisted we were going east while compass and bone said north. An hour, or a year, later, a line of rusted concertina wire rose from the sand. A fence with outposts. Beyond it, the square shoulder of a radar station we hadn't seen in 2 days, its dish broken to a tulip. Human angles. Paint. Hope dressed as infrastructure. Home, Morales murmured, voice warm, and I didn't like that word his mouth anymore. We ducked the wire and made for the ruin. The smoke stopped at the fence line, as if the old metal remembered a jurisdiction even they respected. The air lightened by a hair. Kane keyed his handset, as if muscle memory could bludgeon sense out of the world. Blackjack 2 to actual, he said. We have a structure in sight, possible relay. Request. He didn't finish. A door in the radar building swung open under its own math. Cold air exhaled from a darkness that smelled of old oil and new ash. Inside, at the end of a short corridor, something glowed like a sober star. A lantern. Brass. Filigree. The same wrong cold in a different room. Miller exhaled through his teeth. Alternate ingress, he said. Kane looked at me, then at Morales, then at the door. He didn't order. He asked, and that made it worse. We end this, he said. I believed him. I also knew what the desert believes, that every end is just a different gate. We crossed the threshold, and the door closed behind us with the patience of a mausoleum lid settling. And the lantern, our lantern now, brightened like it had been waiting for the hour it was promised. The radar station felt like a place that had forgotten what people were for. Corridors the width of coffins. Peeling paint in curls like shed skin. A stairwell that went up, then decided down was truer. The smell of oil and ash folded over something sweeter. Dates boiled in milk. A feast left out for guests you shouldn't invite. The lantern waited in the operations room, set alone on a steel table. Brass filigree, lattice, so fine it made the air behind it go soft around the edges. No wick, no fuel, only that cold, amber knot light, coiled tight as a fist. We formed a line without speaking. Cane on point, jaw squared until it ached. Miller a step off his shoulder. Morales beside me, bandage dull under the fluorescence. The glow beneath it steadier now, as if the desert's pulse had found a beat in his blood. The doorway shut behind us with a careful thunk. Rules, Kane said, voice sanded down to commands. Nobody answers anything that knows your name. Nobody trades anything that's been on your body longer than a day. Tags, rings, metal with memory. Nobody says the word welcome. Miller nodded toward the table. What about touching that? Kane's eyes said he would set the table on fire if he thought it would help. We didn't come to touch it. We came to say no. The radio bloom in Morales' chest. Whatever lived in the transistor he wore like a wound, whispered up, a coil of static that wanted to be a syllable. He flinched and pressed a palm to his sternum. I caught his wrist. Stay with me. I am, he said, and the voice under his was not entirely his. The lantern brightened the way a held breath does. The cold inside it spun on an axis we couldn't see, threads of knot light tightening until they hummed. The air listened. A woman's voice crept out of the vent over the table, precise and bored, like a schoolmaster whose students keep failing the same test. Protocol remains unchanged. One witness, one lantern, the rest may depart. Kane set his hands on the table so flat I could see the tremor. We are not your porters. We are not your priests. We don't move your antiques from gate to gate because you don't like the stairs. Not antiques, the voice said. Anchors. The Midwestern man replied from a speaker in the wall we hadn't seen. Gates are holes. Anchors are choices. Spare me your poetry, Kane said. This ends. He pulled a block of C4 from his cargo pocket and set it next to the lantern. The sight of that green putty, so ordinary, so human, hit me like water. He shaped it around the lantern's base, gentle as a medic setting a bone. He looked at me, and his eyes said prepare to be forgiven after I'm gone. Then he eased the detonator in and clicked his thumb once. The room changed temperature the way a body does when fever breaks. Not warmer, not colder, just wrong. The fluorescent fixtures overhead didn't flicker. They bent, tubes sagging an inch, as if gravity had paused for a breath. The lantern's filigree tightened, the patterns in its brass briefly resolving into shapes that were almost letters, and then decided against being readable. The female voice sighed. Purge is allowed only below. You know this. Kane didn't answer. He backed us to the door, thumb hard on the clacker. On my mark. 2 bounds. Left turns only. If the halls don't match, you follow me, not the building. Miller blew out a breath that might have been a prayer. Morales stared at the lantern like a weary man stares at a well he knows is salted. I put my hand on the door lever and felt it cool beneath my palm as if touched from the other side. 3, Kane said. 2. The lantern spoke, not through the vents, not through the pipes or the transistor, through the metal of the table, the bolts in the floor, the fillings in our teeth. A single word that was not a word at all, a chord you could only hear with bone. Stay. My vision doubled. The room slid a half-inch to the left, the way cars do when heat shimmers over asphalt. In the doubled room, we were already ash shadows on the wall. In the true one, we were still standing and about to try not to become ash. The clacker in Kane's fist felt suddenly as heavy as a judge's gavel. Mark, he started. Wait, Morales said, and for once it was his voice cleanly. It doesn't want all of us. It never did. It wants an agreement. You aren't making it, Kane said. Morales shook his head. The glow under his gauze brightened, then steadied. It already stamped me. If I don't walk out of here, that stamp stays. On you. On Miller. On anyone who comes looking. If I take the lantern, maybe it goes with me. Miller's jaw bunched. You don't know that. No, Morales said gently. But I know this. It's been trying to get us to carry something since the well. The pendant. The words. The map in our boots. If we refuse to carry, it finds another way to ride. I would rather choose where it sits. Kane's eyes went to the clock that wasn't there. Every second we spoke, the building slid closer to a decision of its own. Choices are heavy. Buildings like to make them for you. You walk out with that thing, Kane said. You do not walk alone. Morales gave a little smile that hurt to see. I don't anyway. He stepped forward. The lantern's cold swelled like tide under a new moon. The air between his hands and the brass rippled, a mirage made of pressure. He put his palms on either side of the lattice, as if warming them at a fire, and then, so gently, he lifted. It weighed less than it looked. It weighed nothing. It dragged his shoulders like 100 years. Everything with wires in it. Lamps, radios, the old radar dish bolted to the roof, gave a short, grateful sound, like men set free from a duty post at last call. Somewhere in the building a relay fell back into place. The vents exhaled a lungful of air that had been waiting to leave since the Carter administration. The female voice said, almost fond, witness selected. Kane raised the clacker a fraction. Morales. Sergeant, Morales said, and the way he said it, steadfast, polite, the way men say goodbye when they have to pretend they aren't, made my throat go dry. If I start saying something that isn't me, shoot the lantern. Not me. The lantern. Copy. Kane lied. We moved. The door swung open. The hall did not match the hall we'd used to enter. It ran long where it had been short, turned left where it had turned right. We took Kane's turns anyway. The building tried a trick, doubled stairs, doors that opened to the same room we just left. We kept our count like religion and ignored what walls insisted. Outside, the sun had not moved in a way that made sense. The smoke column stood just beyond the fence line like parade detail, eyes low now, not mocking, respectful, witnesses to a witness. When Morales stepped over the threshold with the lantern in his hands, every column lowered to the height of a man. The wind that wasn't wind pawed at our sleeves like a dog, saying, "Hurry, hurry." We walked out under a sky that had been waiting to become evening all day. At the edge of the wire, Morales stopped. He looked back at us, at me. "Home," he said, and that word, in that voice, came out clean. "Make it back. Make it stick." Kane took a breath, then another. He softened somewhere just under the sternum, the place where stubborn turns to mercy, and he nodded. "That's an order," he said, and none of us corrected him. Morales turned toward the desert. The columns flowed aside like curtains. He stepped into heat that did not burn him and began to walk. Each footprint he left glassed for a second, then melted back to sand. The lantern did not swing. It held steady, the cold inside peering ahead like a scout. We watched until distance turned him into a shimmer. The ring closed behind him, not trapping, only honoring. The chanting did not return. Something far below the dunes breathed in and out like a tide meeting a cave mouth and deciding, for now, not to flood. We made for the ridge. The station shrank behind us, the fort a smudge. The map began to match the world again, as if a hand eased off a dial. By the time we hit the gravel track that passes for a road in that part of the kingdom, the radio coughed real encryption. Battalion's voice, our battalion, with its impatience and coffee, cracked through and asked for a sitrep. Kane looked at me. I looked at the horizon, where Shimmer had been a man. We told the truth in pieces small enough to pass inspection and big enough to keep us honest to each other. A helicopter beat the air flat an hour later. Dust Devil spun away in annoyance. Medics looked at our bandages and saw only heat, rash, and dehydration, because that's what their world knows to call such things. We let them. They gave us water and shade and silence to put between this and the next. That night, in a tent that stank of canvas and bleach, I dreamed of a brass lattice held in careful hands. A lantern burning not light, but a promise. That contracts made in old tongues still bind. That deserts keep what you carry into them. That some gates look like doors and some look like men. I woke to tapping, not glass, not stone. The little plastic card in my pocket, the one from the Kwanzaa hut months and worlds ago, rapping against my tags like a fingernail on china. I pulled it out. New letters had imprinted in the cheap plastic, heat pressed by no heat I could name. Containment maintained. Anchor in motion. Below that, a third line, until you return. I put the card away. I lay back. I listened to the wind comb the tent ropes into a song that wasn't quite prayer and wasn't quite threat. Kane snored like a man who had bought his sleep at a price he could live with. Miller whispered the ending of a psalm under his breath and left the amen off like a door ajar. Somewhere far out on the flats, a lone light moved in a line that wasn't on any map. We didn't bring Morales home. He took something of ours with him, and he took something of theirs away. And for now, that's what passes for victory in places the world refuses to learn. But the desert is patient, and every time I feel a breeze that smells like dates and old smoke, I know a gate is walking the long way back, carrying its anchor, waiting for those of us who said no to rest long enough to say yes without meaning to.